Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Place Committee, where we'll be looking at the upcoming Cabinet report on options for the large panel system blocks. The views and comments of Place and People Overview and Scrutiny Committee members will be used to inform the Cabinet's decision making. I'd like to inform those present that this meeting is being webcast live and will be capable of repeated viewing. We do have apologies from Mark Strong. We also have apologies from Mary Davies, co-optee for the Older People's Council, who is unable to attend today. So we've invited Angela Stretton, another OPC rep, to ensure that older people's concerns are heard at the meeting. Welcome. We have one substitution, I believe, which is Councillor Azuddinman for Councillor Mackie. Do any members wish to declare any interest in relation to the matters included on the agenda?
Chair, I would like to declare an interest in Seaside Community Homes. I'm a council trustee of that charity, and there is a reference to Seaside Community Homes in the papers, and that is a prejudicial interest, I think, in a sort of legal sense. I don't know if you have a lawyer advising today.
I think there is one legal officer here, isn't there?
Oh. And how that should be treated, whether I need to leave the chamber or because it's a general discussion.
Yeah, I think it's probably fine, but hey, I'm not a legal officer.
Yes. Okay, so no dispensation.
Sorry, can you say whatever you've just said on the microphone, please, for the purposes of anyone who's watching or who's joined the meeting online? Is that one not working? No, I don't think so.
We were just saying we're not going to be discussing contractual matters regarding Seaside Homes today, so I think it's fine for you to stay.
Marvellous, thank you very much.
Back on that. So we're not discussing contractual matters, but we are discussing issues that affect the operational matters requiring governance issues over the tenancies. So Seaside Community Homes provides temporary housing. It's got 500 properties in its stock. So I think there is some overlap there, but the question I'm asking is I'm not sure to what extent my representation on that board constitutes a prejudicial interest in the scope of this discussion, or whether it doesn't at all.
There's not going to be decision making here as such in terms of it's going to be representations to cabinet. So I think it's possibly as long as it's referenced, it's coming from you. And if there is notes on this that come from you, I think we'll probably actually itemise those. But otherwise, I think it's okay.
Thank you. Okay. We have no part 2 items today, so the press and public won't need to be excluded at any point. So today we are holding this special Place Overview and Scrutiny meeting to look at the appraisal options for the large panel system blocks that require action after structural surveys concluded that they do not meet current safety standards. As this subject has an overlap in remit, we invited members of People Overview and Scrutiny Committee to attend and provide input if they wish to. I think it's safe to say that this will be coming back probably to both scrutiny committees in the future as well as the process unfolds. We are being asked to note the appraisal options report on the LPS blocks and to make comments or recommendations on these proposals to Cabinet. We are joined by Councillor Jill Williams, quite a lineup we've got here. Councillor Jill Williams, Cabinet Member for Housing, who will be presenting this item. We also have with us Darren Levy, Interim Director for Housing Regeneration, supported by officers from the Directorate of Homes and Adult Social Care, Jeanette Laws, Martin Reid, Harry Williams and Sam Smith, who are on hand to help with any questions. We are also joined, I believe, by Laura Webster and Siobhan Fry. Welcome all. Although we have only one item on the agenda, there are a lot of us here this afternoon, and so we will have a lot of questions to get through. Can I therefore please request that both those asking and answering questions are as brief and to the point as possible, as we want everyone who wishes to contribute to have the opportunity to do so. Thank you. So there's no public questions and there are no member questions. So we will move it along. Councillor Williams, would you like to present to the committee? I believe you have some slides.
We do. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I feel like we've got a great lineup. I almost want a photograph on my wall that I'm going to take home from today. All very professional and very hard-working officers here. Okay, so if we can go to the next slide, please. I'm just going to give you a bit of background and a little bit take you through the content that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to first tell you a little bit about the background for those who are not aware. I know many of us are, but everybody knows all the details. And then we're going to talk a little bit about resident engagement. Then we're going to then look at the option appraisal findings in a bit of detail, because this is really, really important part of it, and some of the cabinet paper recommendations, which we'll be happily take questions on. So by way of context, all of these blocks are built in the mid-60s. They're very, very old blocks, and they all are all of concrete construction, what we call LPS buildings. And what the part of the problem there is the way they were built. It is now found that there's a possibility that there may be a safety issue if there was a fire or a small explosion. Now, none of them are sustainable in their current condition. We are making them safe, and they are safe right now, but we can't guarantee that they'll be safe in the long term. So this is really what this is all about. We do have 558 households altogether across the 8 blocks, so there is a lot of residents involved, and there will be, without a doubt, a lot of disruption for these residents. 90 leaseholders, and that's including 45 seaside-owned homes, and that's the only time I'm ever going to mention seaside throughout, okay, but just as a recognition. Okay, lots of work, of course, as we know, lots of work and actions have been carried out to keep them safe to live in for our residents, and we will continue to do that. And even the voids we are using, because our people are going to be moving out and to be rehomed or rehoused, we are going to be using the voids for the near future for temporary accommodation, because we do need those types of accommodations in the city. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as far as background is concerned, for those of you who are not aware, we commissioned a report. It was us as a council who commissioned this report, because we are looking at the safety of our buildings. And this is called the Ridge Report, which is available on our website for you. And that was clear that these LPS buildings are not sustainable in the mid to long term in their current condition. So doing nothing is not an option. Now, the MHCLG have confirmed, this government ministry, sadly, and I did write to them recently and I got a reply, which I wasn't happy with. I've confirmed that no funding is available for remediation of LPS blocks, which is, I may say, disappointing. The cabinet member, which is me, have related my feelings on that. Now, there is no perfect solution to this. There is no silver bullet, and we will need to solve these problems that we're facing in parallel, because there are a lot. There are 8 blocks, 558 households. We do need to look at how we're going to fund it, how we're going to fund the redesign, redevelopment, or wherever we choose to do in the future is going to take a lot of funding, and we need to look at that. But be assured, and this is really important, so if any of your residents ask, all current council tenants have social rents. They're all social renters, our council tenants in these blocks, and they will continue to be entitled to the same wherever they move. This is the most important thing at the moment, because this is what's worrying all of those residents. They have a tenancy with us and they take the tenancy with them. We don't terminate it, so they are safe It's just that where we're going to put them is another project. So, and we've done an awful lot, and we'll continue to do ongoing engagement with people living in the buildings, which is absolutely essential for a project such as this. So we've carried out welfare visits for each and every single tenant, has had an individual welfare visit to assess their needs. And some of the interesting outcomes of that is we found hoarders, for example, and we also found repairs that were not reported, and so on and so forth. So it was really useful. And I would like to do that with all our tenants a bit more regularly if we had the resources, and to look at what their housing needs will be for when they move. We've got ongoing droppings, which Darren's appeared at many of them, on site, and individual household meetings where needed if they need extra help. We've got ongoing newsletters very regularly, so whatever we're going to do, because really before we tell you, we really ought to tell the tenants. They should be the first to know. So they get a newsletter about what's happening next. We've had some residence days for the residents and for the councillors to attend, and I attended what I'm going to do, believe, Fowler, and as attended yours in Honbury, which were very successful, although I do understand they're quite emotional as well with some of those residents. And we're going to continue to do this on a very regular basis, and this is really important. Also, door knocking in case people have missed or don't read the newsletters or they don't know what's going on. So we're doing everything we can to reach out to those residents and to answer their questions. We're going to now develop a resident advisory panel, which has been created for each of the 3 sites, subject to cabinet approval, of course, and they'll be working with us for the next phase of the programme. And this will be an opportunity for residents to work with architects, we hope, to co-produce designs for potential new buildings and new homes for the future. So there is an awful lot going on with resident engagement. And for the next slide, I'm going to hand over to Darren. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I just wanted to give a general overview of the options appraisal findings, and obviously we can go into more detail with the questions later. So there were the 3 options that were essentially reviewed: strengthening the building, strengthening and refurbishment, and regeneration, which would be demolishing the existing buildings and providing new homes on those sites. In short, strengthening couldn't be done on its own because of the scale of work that would be required to the buildings to get to the core of them would require refurbishment afterwards. So you couldn't just do a strengthening exercise, you'd have to do strengthening and refurbishment. Because the strengthening options only came with a maximum 20-year lifespan before they'd potentially have to be done again, it would mean we'd have to continue with the offer to buy back leasehold properties because people still wouldn't be able to secure mortgages. So we've incorporated that cost into the strengthening refurbishment option, which essentially brings us to a cost of around 166.261 million across the 8 blocks. To put that into perspective, the overall 5-year HRA stock investment programme that was approved at Cabinet in February was for just under 290 million. So for these 8 blocks, it would absorb 2/3 of the council's 5-year complete stock investment budget, and only give the blocks 20 years. And also that's for a very basic refurbishment. There would still be significant further investment required to those blocks. So the report moves on to recommend that the Cabinet approves in principle for us to progress with the 3rd option, which is around regeneration. Essentially, that would be demolishing the existing buildings and building new homes and buildings on those sites. It would create more homes for the future that meet current housing needs. Within the blocks at the moment, they're sort of mostly 1s and 2 bedrooms. A new development would allow us to develop sort of 3 bedrooms and larger. It would also allow us to develop specifically adapted properties in line with planning regs and the housing needs assessment. The other piece around this is we deliver it as part of a place approach. So in some of the sites, there are other schemes close by that delivering these sites could enable us to bring those other sites forward at the same time. Go to the next slide. I've abbreviated the key recommendations, so I'm happy to skip through those if that would be useful, or we could go to questions. I'm happy to be guided. Would you like me to take you through the key recommendations? Okay. So while we've presented them in the paper by site, because of all the analysis on a site-by-site basis, so we felt they should be recommendations based on each individual site. The recommendations are fairly common between each of the sites. So there's a first recommendation, which is Cabinet agrees in principle to the preferred option being demolition and replacement with housing in keeping with the needs of the city and the regeneration of the site. With that in principle recommendation, we would then ask for Cabinet to approve for officers to progress with the delivery of design and feasibility of that new build site and regeneration, and appoint a multidisciplinary team to work with the internal team on developing those plans. The sort of parallel piece to that is to look at what the appropriate delivery mechanism would be for delivering the new build site, whether that's the in-house team under the sort of Homes for Neighbourhood programme, whether that's the joint venture with Hyde, or whether that's a sort of third party where we need to go out to market to find a third party delivery partner. And we need to do that in parallel to developing the scheme, and look for what is the most viable option. We are asking for approval from Cabinet to carry out formal consultation with all the residents living in the blocks. Within the paper is already a description of the engagement we've already done. Within the Housing Act, if we make a decision that impacts on where people live, we have to carry out formal consultation under what's called Section 105 of the Housing Act. So we'll be asking Cabinet for approval to begin that process. There is also a request for the council to use its discretionary powers within the allocations policy to allocate all secure tenants living in the blocks a priority band B now, so that secure tenants have the ability to start bidding for properties if they so wish, ahead of any sort of scheme being brought back to Cabinet. And we're asking for permission to consult on a rehousing policy and local lettings plan. And those essentially would be the framework to allow us to create a dedicated team that would work with residents and support them as we found them new accommodation to move on. The reason that we're asking for that now is because of the time limited space we've got. The blocks have got 3 to 5 years before we would need to do something. So we need to start moving secure tenants on now so that we've got the maximum time to find people appropriate accommodation. And we're not backing up to the last 2 years and having to be done in an unplanned way. If you go on to the next slide, please. We're asking Cabinet to note that further work will be carried out with leaseholders. Obviously, there's significant implications from leaseholders if the council does make an in principle approval of moving forward with the regeneration of the site, and we need to talk to leaseholders about what their potential options are should we reach the point of a demolition notice for the buildings. And then the final bit is to agree the budget to carry out that work. There's a secondary recommendation with regard to Whitehawk. While carrying out the work looking at the North Whitehawk 5 blocks, we've come across a lot of other consultations with regard to other sites within the Whitehawk area, and also sort of related consultations relating to this. There's a skate park that's being talked about. Whitehawk's a key part of the council's decarbonisation pathway report. So we're recommending that Cabinet take this opportunity to do a wider master planning and visioning exercise for that area of the city, which could then sit as part of the future city plan. So I hope that was helpful in terms of summarising the recommendations, and happy to move on to questions.
Thank you very much, both of you. So, questions? Got a sea of hands. Liz, then Teresa, Fowler, then Sue and Ollie and Anne. And Bridget. Sorry? Oh, sorry, Mohammed as well. Go on. I'll just write everyone's name down in a big list. Oh, and Councillor McClay online. Okay, well, we'll just I'm going to rely on Natalie, the order that I said those in. Will you write them down? I wasn't. Oh, God, okay. Liz, you were first.
Just a couple of points. So the replacement blocks that will be hopefully coming in the pipeline with the master plan vision will presumably have potential to increase supply. And I just wondered how progressed you are with that idea, and what possibly could be a sort of target in terms of housing unit numbers overall. And secondly, with respect to placemaking, East Brighton in particular suffers from a deficit of place space and poor amenity. So something that I think you probably noted with your placemaking proposals. Is it the intention of the housing department to come forward with a brief that can be consulted on to address all those issues with planners and with councillors? And I think actually that's all on those 2 points that you just covered. Thank you.
So I'll take the second point first in terms of the wider master planning. I think the intention would be to approach it through a co-production methodology. I think the first thing is to kind of get a strategic position on the red line and how far that spans across Whitehawk. So I think there would be sort of some members' workshops. The idea would be then to carry out workshops with stakeholders and residents to understand what their priorities and concerns or needs are for the area. And yes, it's going to be more than just residential development. It would be about amenities, it would be about play areas, public realm, connectivity, whether there's the opportunity to bring jobs to the area, all of that type of thing. I think it's an opportunity to do something and create a vision for the next 15 to 20 years for that area, I think. So it's a really potentially sort of groundbreaking opportunity, I think, for the area. In terms of increasing supply, yes, that's the fundamental driver here. And that's why we're looking to use these sites as a catalyst for wider placemaking. So in terms of St James's, for example, there are other schemes around and about St James's which the council is considering. If we use this as a catalyst and deliver it all together, you can deliver more numbers, but also increase your chances of viability. Whereas if you just do it site by site, viability becomes increasingly challenging.
I can add a little bit actually. For my area in Whitehawk, it is a very difficult and very challenging time, but it also presents us with some great opportunities, because in that particular area, there is no space, no workspaces, very little amenities. And this could give us that opportunity to completely change that. And I think looking forward, I'm quite excited at that prospect.
Thank you. Teresa, you had you there next.
Yeah, thank you for the engagement. It was really useful, and I attended and spent the whole time talking to residents. I mean, my main concern is the way they feel, and I hope they're made to feel happy about this, because believe it or not, they absolutely love living in my ward, Nettleton and Duderney. They do absolutely love living there. I think one resident said he'd only just moved in and was really disappointed that this is going to happen to him. And another resident had lived there 35 years. So, I mean, her worry is that she was going to, after living there 35 years and being fairly elderly and being able to look out on those beautiful views, and then all of a sudden being put somewhere that's, dark and dingy. And she's had sleepless nights. And I think probably a lot of residents are having sleepless nights over this and worrying. I understand you're going to do St James's first, because that's more immediate. I don't know whether, which one's next. Did you just say that you were doing them all together, or you're doing one at a time? I couldn't quite remember. Pardon?
We'd certainly be approaching it through a phasing approach. So the programme outlined within the Cabinet paper is to begin the process with St James residents once we've consulted on the rehousing policy and tenant offer. I think we've scheduled in January as the target date to have consulted on the rehousing policy and start and have the resettlement team in place. And then by the end of next year to begin the process of Hollingdon and the following year with Whitehawk. And we need to phase it in that way to try and for us to manage it in a programme way, but also we need to be cognizant of the wider impact on the housing waiting list and using up lettings. And I'm happy to pass over to Harry and talk a little bit about that process. Before I do, just to say I've been on the site quite a lot, and the message I've got from residents is very similar. You know, lots of people are really rooted in their communities, and they really like where they live, especially in places like Nettleton and Dudney. I was at the Whitehawk Residents' Day a couple of Saturdays ago, and there was a clear message from people that they like their communities. So there's a clear piece of work for us to do as we go through that to make sure we're enhancing that community feel and keeping people in the area that want to stay in the area. So I think it needs to be a core focus as we go through the next phase.
That's what I wanted to keep, was the feeling that they're going to lose friendship, especially when they've been there all the time and they're quite elderly and they rely on their friends. And I just don't, I just want you to be able to think about that when you're moving people on. And maybe, do they need to rush to do this to find the best property, or would it be better as they're the Nettleton and Dudney is second, whether it's best to wait and just be calm about it and just wait and see what happens after the first block's done? I don't know.
Just to add to that, it is very distressing. There's no doubt about it, and we will be, proceeding with compassion and care, because this is very emotional and there are lots of ties to the area and to their homes. So each resident, that's why every resident gets an individual visit to assess their needs, and we will be really careful where we can to be able to place people in a similar area in similar types of accommodation that they're used to. Might not always be possible, but we will certainly be consulting very closely with each resident, won't we, to hopefully address the needs.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you. Just to add on to that, we really understand and recognise the impact that this will have if the recommendation is agreed will have on residents. And it's really great to hear all the stories about how people are so passionate about the local area. And we really take that into account. And as Councillor Williams has already mentioned, we've visited 99% of the residents within all of the blocks and have a really good understanding about who they are and what their ambitions are. And all of that will be taken into account when we're looking to move people on to new homes. We've touched a little bit about what that process will look like, but just to go in a bit more detail. So if the recommendation's agreed, the households not already on the council's housing register, which is the waiting list for social housing, will be banded B onto the register, and will have the opportunity then to start bidding on social homes within the city that they feel that they would like to move into. There's a 2 to 3 year time frame with the regeneration, so there is time to start bidding on specific properties, and people have that choice. We'll be visiting again all residents impacted if the decision is agreed, to provide that tailored support and single point of contact to support residents throughout this process. As we move through the programme, we'll be taking a phased approach to rehousing residents living within the blocks, starting with St James. And to support that, we will be developing, as has been mentioned already today, a rehousing and a local lettings plan, which will outline how households would be moved into new homes and the support specifically they'll be able to access. And really hearing about what residents have said to us before, we really are going to prioritise people staying within their local communities because of those networks and those connections that they've developed over the years. And that's so important to us as a housing provider about developing sustainable communities, and that network is a really key part of that as well.
Thank you. Right, apologies to anyone if I got this order wrong. There's such sea of hands. I don't know if I got them in the right order here, but I'm going to go Sue, then Anne, then Ollie next. Okay, in which case I'm going to go Ollie, then Anne, then Sue.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Can I first of all, I just want to recognise the work that's been done. I think it's an impressive volume of work that's comprehensive, and I feel like I've been provided with technical assurance about the technical content and engagement to inform the options. So thank you very much to officers for that. I've got a few, but quite short questions really. Question about whether there are any other council buildings which require a fire risk appraisal of external walls, so not the same problem but similar in relation to sort of risks around fire risk assessments, and whether there are any other buildings of the same era in the city which we don't have a direct responsibility for, but we may know about that may fall in the same category, so sort of large panel system buildings. Then about a variety of delivery mechanisms have been referred to. Can officers or Councillor Williams confirm that the intention is that these sites remain for social housing? Question about the cost. 500 million is referred to in the preamble, but the total of option 3 for each site, I totted it up to be 240 million, so it might be 240 plus design plus demolition. Could you clarify the cost there? On Dewdney and Nettleton, and there's talk at 7.59 about expanding the site boundary. Which way is that? Is that towards environmental services site or towards Nettleton and Dewdney? And can you just sort of confirm the budget figures? The total of the immediate ask to Cabinet is about 7.5 million. There's about 4.5 million in the HRA budget for this year. So is that budget according to what you've been planning? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take one point. I'll hand over to Martin about other buildings, if that's okay. He has some more knowledge of that. Yes, absolutely. Our plan is to increase social housing supply. So we could optimise those sites to increase our offer. And we are very short of particularly 3-bed homes, as we all know. And we want to increase that, don't we, as well? So yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for the question. There are no other large panel system blocks in the city, either with the council or with private sector providers. It's a national issue, LPS blocks, but the only 8 we have in the city, the ones you are aware of. In terms of external wall fire risk assessments, high-rise blocks require those. So we will do those, not high-rise blocks, and other owners of high-rise blocks in the city will have to do them as well. And what happens is once we've done one of those, the results of that are encompassed in a fire risk assessment. It's part of the overall fire risk assessment process. So it kind of follows that trajectory. So ultimately the fire risk assessment for a block should include consideration of the external wall considerations. There's no other blocks, as I said, like this in the city though.
Thank you.
I think there are more questions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go on.
So just in terms of the 240 to the 500, the 500 is really referring to the entire sort of placemaking programme. Once you start bringing in other schemes and you do wider master planning, it's likely to be far in excess of just the sort of site capacity studies that have been done. In terms of Nettle and Dewdney, yeah, our view was to use this as an opportunity to look at the sort of going across into the depot site. And whether there's an opportunity to share that site. I don't want to sort of set hairs running there, but it was just, there's an opportunity to review the potential.
Thanks. Anne.
Thank you, Chair. The recommendation to demolish and rebuild. I do recall in the 1970s when Whitehawk was last regenerated, my sister lived in a council house there with an outside loo, and when I babysat, and I used to have to creep out the back door along a path into that horrible, horrible place. I was absolutely petrified every time. They needed to be demolished. They were actually put up in beautiful homes. Hundreds of homes were demolished. They were put up in Port Slade. Beautiful modern homes. And my sister hated it because she was away from her friends and neighbours. She preferred also being nearer the town centre. So I'm pleased to hear that you're taking that sort of thing into consideration. So it's been done before. And I think it's quite brave of you to start again. However, I do have a few questions. Okay, so the first one has been dealt with. I'm pleased to see priority band B to all tenants. That'd be really useful for them. But going on to temporary measures, for 9 steps been taken apparently, and 4 more apart from the car park at St James's House. Will you be using the car park when you rebuild St James's House, or will the car park be gone? Because I know it had a refurbishment, didn't it, recently? So I just wondered about that. And it's talking about all the following fire risk assessments. It talks about temporary heating plants and all the rest. I just wondered, that I presume would have to be done immediately to assist in what's going on until they're able to be demolished, because you've got to wait till the entire block's vacant before you can demolish, otherwise you would be in trouble. On page 26, it talks about leaseholders. Now, I'm glad to see leaseholders being taken care of appropriately, but an Audit and Standards Committee, I drew out the fact that these 8 blocks have no value anymore, nil value. So they have nil insurance, although I was assured there is viability insurance left on those blocks. But it did mean that the mortgages are invalid, their insurances are invalid, everything, their contents insurance are invalid, as are the tenants. And I just thought, actually, they can only sell to the council as they struggle with all of that. So I wondered, it's good because a lot of them wanted to sell and couldn't because of where they are placed, unfortunately. So, but moving on page 26, it talks about the costs. You will be given the cost of an independent valuation plus another £500 and VAT. Then you'll be assisting them to purchase, a 10% uplift on their purchase cost of paying back to you. They're selling back to you. They will get a 10% uplift on that cost. Plus repayment of right to buy discount is waived. I did think that's quite a big loss to the council, actually. 43 leaseholders, about £100,000 per property at least. Some are 120 or more. So that discount's quite a big chunk. Removal costs, mortgage redemption fees up to £10,000, reasonable onward purchase legal fees up to £2,000, plus stamp duty payments, which could take, you've got the cost of the property, and I'm no accountant, so we take it at 400,000, plus it's going to cost about another 175,000 on top of per property for all those inducements to get them to sell. They want to sell anyway, but that's beside the point. So we had, I believe, 43 million set aside for that. Is that going to be enough? With all the other on costs that the council will have. So that's one of the questions. Then coming back, I was interested about what will be happening with tenants' contents insurance, because now tenants have to have their own. Some are purchased through the council's own housing tenants' contents insurance. Presumably they're more protected than those who went for the cheaper option, which is a private insurance. I just wondered, if anything did happen, how will those insurance payments be made? Because if they're done privately, they will say, well, there's nil cost, blocks have already been condemned in effect because of these proposals. and may refuse to pay out. So I'm just wondering what blanket thing is there, safety blanket is there for tenants if anything happens to their properties in the meantime. Then coming back to, I was interested to see, I wanted to know the figures on how many in each block. You said there's a total of 558, but I wanted to know how many in each block and how many you try to increase it by each block, or how many will you increase it by exponentially? 558, would you go for 1,000? I mean, would you go for more? Just wanted to see that. And then coming back to the finances, I was interested to see that it was been modelled over a 20-year lifespan. Of course, that's what you've put in the report now, but I know that that would only be repayable over 20 years if the social housing rent calculator was used to the maximum rent level. To rent out these new builds at social rent, the payback time will be nearer 60 to 80 years, 3 to 4 times longer. I realise that's probably another debate. However, I believe that should come back to committee, as it will have a catastrophic effect or impact on the budget going forward. But then I noticed on page 21 that you are proposing social rent with a subsidy that goes on for 60 years. Every year, 60 years. That is huge. There is a formula for each new home to ensure that there's enough money to continue buying back properties, building new homes and maintaining them. But that proposal ignores all of that good advice. I was interested in what you said about the government won't pay for or won't allow any funding for this. But Angela Rayner's saying there's £39 billion. What would be Brighton Hove's estimation of what they can get? What's their portion? Given Angela Rayner's positive redistribution of government funding, I think we'd probably get very little, but I was thinking you could probably put some of the funding you put aside for building new properties and sink it into that fund for rebuilding these and then getting more from, but I doubt if we get very much from that proposal. I was concerned about the consultations. Actually, you stated that we've been an officer to talk to 98 out of 100, say, residents, but only 30% consultation came back. And I thought that was a pretty poor response for something that's quite major in their area. So visited 121 out of 123 households, yet the responses were only 30%. I thought, gosh, that's low. Done the tenants insurance. Yes, I noted that decluttering and downsizing will be helped, and that's great. My question is around, will each tenant be given like for like in Band B? By that, I mean, if they're presently a single person occupying a 2-bedroom property, will they only require a 1-bed? So will they get what they want or what they need, which could cause a few anxious moments for some tenants. And then,
can I just stop you, because you've asked an awful lot of questions. So if we ask the officers to give you answers to those, you can always go back on the end of the list, because then other people will get a chance. Is that all right?
Thanks. I've made a list. Hopefully we've got all your questions, and I've hopefully got the right officer with the right questions. So we'll go with that. So your question about the car park at St James's, I think Laura will be able to take that one.
Yeah, just to clarify that point, the assumption is that the basement car park would remain in situ, and that would be subject to sort of further survey work and design work. But the assumption is that we keep the car park.
Thank you. Mitigation, Martin.
Thank you, councillors. Once we've done the surveys, our primary aim was to keep the blocks safe for people to occupy. And what the report outlines is significant measures we put in place to mitigate any risk of fire or uncontrolled explosion. They're set out in the main report under section 3.4. And that does include temporary closure of the car parks. And it also includes a range of measures, including storage for e-scooters, e-bikes, removal of the communal heating from under St James's House. That's all happened, and that will continue to be in place. And we'll continue to spend money, as you'd expect, to make sure the homes remain safe to occupy. So there's no impairment on our spending, day-to-day spending, you could say, on repairs or on keeping homes safe. That isn't really in question in terms of this report. So the mitigation is in place, and it will stay in place pending the decisions about the future of the blocks. But that is significant and extensive.
Thank you, Martin. Could you also cover insurance for tenants? Question about tenants.
Sorry. So tenants would have to take their own insurance, but I think on the details of the insurance, Councillor Meadows, will come back to you in writing on that to make sure we've got all of your points answered, because you mentioned building insurance, tenant insurance, and the other insurances as well. So I think probably it's fairer to members to give a written response. I mean, tenants will have their own insurance, we'll have building insurance responsibilities, but we will find that out for you and give you a written response on insurance.
Thank you, Martin. And I think, Darren, if you'd like to address the leasehold question.
What can you remind what was the specific leasehold question?
You okay to rule that, Martin?
I believe was 43 million going to be enough?
Sorry.
Boiled down.
The current HRA budget includes provision as the future, but we have to buy back from leaseholders, because essentially what we're doing is proposing, subject to approval, regeneration, refurbishment of homes, which means that people won't be able to stay in those homes. So it's incumbent upon us, as it would be any provider, to buy back. And we buy them back at market value, so the leaseholder doesn't have a complete loss of value of the home they bought in good faith. And we're also adding on, obviously, what you've described, Councillor Meadows, in terms of additional support to make sure that leaseholders who perhaps wouldn't otherwise want to move can move comfortably and not be at a loss. So that's the important thing for us with leaseholders. And it's obviously better for us in the first instance to buy back proactively and do that in a managed way, because we're also ensuring that we can keep those homes occupied as well. So the homes, when we buy them back, will be used as temporary accommodation, which as a benefit does help our other pressures around housing stock in the city. And obviously we're putting a lot of thought into how those homes are sensitively managed as well. But certainly proactive leaseholder buyback at market value, so the leaseholders aren't losing out, is something we were asked to do from the very first meetings with residents. Many leaseholders were concerned about the value of their home and how they could move on if they wanted to, but also to make sure we're being equitable and fair. And actually we can then use the housing resource ourselves, pending, whatever decision we make about refurbishment or regeneration.
Thank you, Martin. And Laura, would you like to take the 60 years form of the question?
Thank you. So just to clarify that point, the assumption made from the financial appraisal is 20 years for the refurbishment and strengthening option, and then 60 years for the new build option. So that's because the expected lifespan of the structural works is 20 years, and then new build would be 60 years. And their assumptions we use as kind of sort of standard in our financial appraisals for the new build. The refurbishment is based on that strengthening work having the lifespan of 20 years. In terms of sort of funding and subsidy, kind of as clarified, the refurbishment option, there is no sort of external funding for that. So the assumption would be is all based upon sort of HRA borrowing. The new affordable homes programme that was announced, which is the 39 billion, we would be looking into that, and we believe the kind of more detailed options around that would be due in September. So that's the new programme that's been announced, and I understand the priority from colleagues in Homes England is that social rent is the priority for that programme. So we are in touch with Homes England. We have regular meetings with them, and they're clarifying the detail around that new programme in September.
Thank you, Laura. On the point of consultation, we are continuing and will be continuing with intense consultation with all of the residents and the residents in the surrounding area, which will be affected. Early on, a lot of residents didn't want to particularly engage because I suppose they were in a bit of a state of shock, as you can imagine, when we first announced, the remedial actions we were taking about fire safety, etc. And as we're going along, we're finding residents talking to us more and more. And I think we have to nurture this, and people come to us in their own time because, there is a lot to think about, a lot to take in. So that consultation will be ongoing and continuous. Downsizing, Harry, would you be able to take that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. So people will be offered like for like, but we will be working with people who might want to downsize, and residents might want to downsize. So, for example, if they're living in a 2-bedroom property at the moment, they have a 1-bed need. Part of the work we do to support them is about how we can also offer a 1-bedroom property, but our starting point is like for like.
Did that answer all of your questions? Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just come back on 2 things? The mitigations, that's all the blocks in the city. So there's no new mitigations, for e-bikes, mobility scooters being left in corridors, etc. That's every block across the city has that, because I'm aware of the high-rise ones across the road from St James's House have those. And the other thing was... No, thank you for about Angela Rayner's update in September. I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you.
Right, I think I've got Sue.
Sorry, can I just raise one?
Sorry.
Through you, Chair. Sorry, just one point of clarification. The mitigations I described are for the LPS blocks. We have a whole fire safety programme for other high-rise blocks in the city. The LPS blocks are quite specific, large panel systems, because there's a particular risk to the structure of those buildings should there be an uncontrolled explosion or fire. That's the particular issue about e-bikes and e-scooters. We've got a range of other fire safety programmes on the other high-rises. That specific mitigation is for the LPS blocks.
Thank you. Clarification, Sue, and then I think Mohammed after that.
Yeah, I've got a couple perhaps points, but anyway, in terms of the other blocks in the city, for example, in my ward here, Boulder, Mayflower particularly needs, a lot of these do really need knocking down and starting again, and have done for a while. So I suppose I'm just concerned that those will be, obviously that will be left, a lot longer. Although I think what Martin just said was that was a separate in terms of fire safety and things. But I suppose how are we going to prioritise, all of the different blocks in the city? I never understand this 60-year business really, because a lot of people in the city live in houses that were built obviously in the Victorian age, and they seem to be doing fine. So I've had that argument as well at planning and things. I don't really understand why we have to go for 60 years. I presume it's a national thing. I'm really pleased that you're going to look at Whitehall as a whole place, and I don't know if you can look at secondary school provision while you're doing that, because that's been something that's been really important. As a community, I think, the East Brighton Trust obviously tried to do work there in the past, but it would be really good to look at that as a whole thing. In terms of, I'm not really sure why we would use the voids for temporary accommodation. I know we're desperate for temporary accommodation, but to me it seems a bit wrong to put people. For one thing, a lot of temporary accommodation people have been in there a long time. So are you not just adding more tenants that you've now got to house somewhere else? And also, if it is potentially risky, because it potentially is. I don't really think that's a sensible thing to do, although I know we're desperate for temporary accommodation. And in terms of the consultation, so you've said a lot of we and us and who's talking, but I suppose I always think it's quite good to have like a specific group of people who aren't necessarily the housing officers or even a person who's a named person, so that tenants can say, I'll go and ask, whoever it is, and that they have access to them rather than
because I think sometimes, people, that's my experience with residents often in the council blocks, they're not really sure who they should contact. They get a different officer every time. So having a group of people that would be visible and maybe have some sort of flat, office somewhere on the estate would be really useful, I think. So that's more of a point than a question, I suppose. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And yes, we will be having, or we have got, a community engagement team specific to this purposes, and Darren will tell you more.
Certainly, the funding request within the cabinet report includes resources to have additional community engagement officers on the ground working on the sites. It also includes a dedicated rehousing team. So when we come to rehousing people, they'll have a single point of contact with the council and somebody working with them as a household or a family. So that's very much core part of the offer that we'll be looking to put forward.
Okay, thank you. Was there any other questions in there?
Yeah, on the 60 years, it is our standard practice to do that on all of our housing developments. Industry standard would be 40 to 60 years, so we kind of push the boundaries by modelling it over 60 years, and that reflects that we'd borrow money for the development over 60 years and pay it back through the rental stream, and obviously that helps us with viability challenges. But to go beyond 60 years is riskier and not something which would be seen as sort of acceptable in the wider industry. So I think for 60 years is a good amount to model new build over.
And just on the other questions, Councillor Shanks, we're still investing in our other high-rise blocks. There's fire safety programs across the high-rise blocks. At Theobald House, there's a specific major works program identified for that in our budget. So this isn't instead of LPS, this is in addition to LPS. We don't stop our investment or keeping homes safe. Because of the mitigations I mentioned, the homes are safe to occupy. We are using them as temporary accommodation for two reasons. One is to make sure they're not empty, because that would be a kind of an underuse of a resource that we desperately need. And also they do provide good quality homes for people who might otherwise be in poor quality temporary accommodation, spot purchase accommodation or other accommodation, either within Brighton Hove or outside of Brighton Hove. So temporary accommodation is a really positive option for us, given we are buying the homes back and we are using them when they become interim tenants. And in fact, these homes had temporary accommodation potted through them anyway, as part of a mixed tenure approach. So we continue to invest. Also, we have got budget challenges, so it's cost effective. The investment also includes increased investment in community engagement and neighbourhood officers. So that's really around making sure those estates are well supported as well, so that we have people on the ground who can address issues arising.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go back over this side now. So I've got Mohammed and then Julie to start with. Go, Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair. I got two simple questions. What percentage of our council stock do this 8 block represent? My second question is, it says in the report that 25 of the 43 leaseholders across the 8 block have engaged with the council about their situation. Do we know why the other 18 so far not done so yet?
So in terms of proportion, there's 558 units within the 8 LPS blocks. I think we've got around 14,000 homes. So about 4.5% of total council homes. In terms of leaseholders, of the leaseholders remaining, we've got around 20 that are either at the valuation or in the conveyancing process. So that initial cabinet approval in March for us to do the buybacks with the enhanced offer has generated quite a bit of interest.
Thank you. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo what Ollie said about the amount of work that's been put in, and I must admit, as a kind of retired planner, I'm really I'm really impressed by the sort of placemaking opportunities that have been put into it. So that's and I don't know whether I'll be around to be on planning committee when they come anyway. Now, if I was on the housing waiting list and I've been on it for kind of a couple of years, I would be a bit cheesed off to hear that people are going to be, rehoused ahead of me. So my first question is, how are you going to be selling this to people on the waiting list? And looking at when people are displaced and moved into different communities, if they had free parking around in their blocks like Dudney and Nettleton and so on, will we offer them a free parking permit or something when they're if they get rehoused in a parking zone, so on. Are we inviting private landlords to take on displaced tenants on guaranteed rolling leases and fixed reasonable, what we call reasonable social rents? Only a couple more, sorry. Are we looking at ways of helping to keep communities together by like having, regular meetups, social events, show them all how to do WhatsApp and so on? Can we remove the right to buy? And finally, will the projects be ring-fenced under devolution? Thank you.
Thank you. I think Harry can take the first couple, I think. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. Totally understand the impact on the housing register. And as I mentioned, if the recommendation is approved, it would mean around 300 households being placed onto the housing register, and that in turn will have an impact on people already on the housing register waiting for social homes. The need there is great. Obviously, there are people within these blocks who are being significantly impacted, or maybe significantly impacted by the decision. So we really recognise the impact that this has on them, and it's important to us to make sure that we reflect that within our allocation scheme to make sure that they have the opportunity for a new social home. The medium term, to sort of ease the impact that has on the register, there are a number of new developments coming up within the city that will increase the supply of council and social homes within the city that would help offset the impact of the LPS blocks. But even longer term, if we look at what we call the waiting times for people on our housing register, if we look at households with a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom need, for example, they can often be waiting on the register for periods in excess of 8 years. The opportunity with this, the regeneration of the blocks, is that we increase our supply of our most needed homes within the city, so increasing the supply of 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses, for example. So whilst there'll be short-term impact for people on the housing register, which we will mitigate as much as possible through that phased approach by looking at blocks over sort of a 3-4 year period. Medium term, the new supply of affordable and social homes within the city will help mitigate that impact. And then longer term, it's about getting the homes that we need in the city to meet the needs of people on the waiting list.
Just to follow up on that, and I think the other piece about this is being completely transparent. There is an impact, and there will be, and we just need to be transparent about that and show how we're trying to mitigate that risk over the coming years. In terms of the point around using private landlords to temporarily rehouse people, our aim is for one move only. So if you're a secure tenant, we'll look to find you another secure tenancy to move to. There would also be in the proposed rehousing or tenant offer is the principle of a right to return. And that's where we were talking earlier about residents becoming part of a resident advisory group and able to do co-production of designs of the new homes. In that if you're a secure tenant moving away, you would still have the right to return even though you've gone to a secure tenancy. Certainly in terms of engagement and meetups, that's certainly been part of our conversations in planning for post-cabinet, if approval is given to generate that kind of local community. And it came through really strongly in the resident days as well. Yeah. So it's something we came away from the resident days thinking about because it's something the residents really wanted. In terms of right to buy, I think the only point at which that stops is when we're issued a demolition notice. in terms of right, you were talking about right to buy. I think the point at which we could stop that is at the point you serve an interim demolition notice on the blocks. For the new blocks, if you move in as a secure tenant, then you would have the right to buy if they're let as council tenants under the current legislation. Yeah.
Use your mic. Yes, ring fenced under Devo.
I can guarantee whatever shape devolution comes to us, we will be continuing with this project.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to go to TJ and then Ty, and then I'm going to go back over this side to Bridget and Angela.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to quickly pick up on the report in relation to what's being offered to the private sector tenants within these LPSs, because in comparison to what's been offered to leaseholders and to our secure tenancies, the information there seems rather lacking. With essentially if anyone has any questions, they're being signposted to the homelessness service, which feels very harsh for people who are being evicted through no fault of their own. And also with right to return, how's that going to look for the private sector tenants? Because obviously, especially if their house is their landlord is having their house bought off them by the council, they're not going to have a private sector rental to return to. So are they not covered by the right to return?
So just to confirm, the right to return is for secure tenants where we have a statutory sort of obligation. I'll pass over to Harry just in terms of the support we can offer. I think there's around 23 properties that are currently with leaseholders who then let the properties out, just to provide some scale.
Thank you, Darren, and thank you, Councillor Williams. So just on private tenants living within a leasehold property, for example. So the first step within their process, within their journey, would be accessing help with homelessness from the council. They may decide to find alternative arrangements, might find their alternative private rented accommodation, but the first step within that process is accessing the council's homelessness service, and then from there we would support them in finding alternative accommodation. They'll also be able to access support from that dedicated team working with residents within the blocks, and we're looking at this as a cross-tenure approach about moving residents on from the blocks. But secure tenants do have different able to access different benefits compared to a private tenant, for example, and it's important that we recognise that as well. Coming back on that, it feels really, really harsh to tell someone who we as the council are moving out because of this to then turn to home services. We're talking about people who have never had to, who they're up to date with all their rents, they've done everything right, they've paid by the book, and they're being directed into the homelessness system, effectively being directed into the homelessness system. And I get there is a dedicated team for that, and I'm glad to hear that. But it just feels really harsh of us to be labelling that as we've got to take this down due to a report from ESFS. Sorry, can you now go? You're now homeless. Go to our homelessness service. Sure, I understand we don't have the same duty to private sector tenants that we do to our tenants, but surely we should be still doing something to help them find alternative accommodation, not making them go through the homelessness system.
Okay. Can we note that point as a point that's been made by Scrutiny, and we'll take that under advisement and look at our approach to the rehousing policy. So thank you for raising it.
Okay, Ty.
Thanks, Chair. I think this has been a really fascinating scrutiny panel, and in that spirit of scrutiny, I too, like Councillor Sykes and Cattell, want to recognise the scale of the work that clearly that the department has done. And we know it's more than lip service. And I'm really pleased to hear Councillor Williams talk about compassion and care. I think we should all, as human beings who happen to be either officers or councillors, have to realise the emotional effect that this will have on tenants and leaseholders. And I also think that you would want to find mechanisms either in scrutiny or within the local authority more widely that are perhaps a little bit more firm than residents' advisory panels to ensure that you keep to your promises to tenants and residents. And whilst I appreciate the work that's gone on, fine words, butter, no parsnips. You've got to keep yourselves as champions of the tenants and leaseholders. And I know you've started that process. I just think you may want to find a more creative, solid way to ensure that you do that. I also think, and it's been raised by a lot of people in the panel, that this is going to put a significant pressure on our housing service. And I think you talked about transparency, Darren. I think, not only transparency externally, but transparency internally in terms of the pressures, the resources that you're going to be under as a housing service. And also, it is going to have a level of capacity and skills that you may not have within the department. And I think you'd also want to look at that in the spirit of risk mitigation. Do you have the skills and the capacity to bring three distinct solutions and visions to being? And I think that I would need to be assured, and I think Scrutiny needs to be assured of that as well. And also, isn't there an elephant in the room in terms of the total funding package? Where is that total funding package going to come from? So I both want to compliment where you're up to, the speed with which you've grappled this, the difficulties that you've already encountered, with also some realism from us all that this is, frankly, a daunting set of projects. And I think it's going to be with us, as you've said, for many, many years. I look at New England House that went to audit and standards, the lack of transparency on New England House, also sometimes the mistakes we make in terms of bigger projects as a local authority in the past. I think we all need to be assured that we can actually handle this and that the promises you make are going to be actually fulfilled. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. I can say that we are engaging with a dedicated engagement team and a very specific team for these groups of people to help them move on, the housing team. And they will be dedicated to that because there are a lot of people and we need to have specialist dedicated help. And that consultation and that compassion and that care will continue on until everybody's settled and beyond, because we need to make sure people are settled. So that I can guarantee. Capacity. Well, we have engaged Darren specifically, and I'm sure he's going to be with us for some time to come, as the project manager of this whole project, and he's going to ensure that we have the capacity and funding. I don't know if you want to talk about.
Yeah, so within the cabinet report, there's funding for additional resource, as well as the community engagement resource. There's also funding for additional resource within the placemaking regeneration team. So there'll be dedicated project managers for sites. The intention would be to commission an external multidisciplinary team of experts that will be needed for the complexity of the sites. And I think it's highly likely that we'll move into three distinct projects. And I think if you try and deal with this as sort of a large program, it will become very, very difficult. So I think it will probably move into site-specific projects that will probably move at their own individual paces as we work through the feasibility work. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to talk about sort of self-financing and viability work.
Yeah, so we need to look at it across the board in terms of all of the investment we're making in new housing and how our current projects that we've got in new homes for neighbourhoods and with the joint venture link into the work we're doing on the LPS and how that funding package stacks up. And that's where the place-based approach that Darren's talking about comes in. just to add in terms of the resources and expertise, we have got some really good experience, but we recognise that this is a new challenge and will require, additional resources. It's been really great to have Darren's expertise come in, and we've also been talking to other local authorities, and we've had other professionals coming in to advise us about consultation and engagement approaches, about on more technical aspects of the programs as well.
Thank you all. Go for it.
I mean, I described it as the elephant in the room, but the total funding package, is how do you feel as officers? You're beginning quite a detailed, hopefully imaginative, hopefully creative placemaking approach, but you haven't got yet that funding package, and that must also confront you with a few issues in terms of, is this going to happen?
I think going back to Councillor Williams' initial sort of PowerPoint, there is no option to do nothing. The blocks, we know from the structural surveys that have been carried out, they're time limited. So we have to solve this in parallel. We have to be talking about the rehousing programme while we solve the viability aspects. If you break it down on a site-by-site basis, yes, it can be solved, but we need to do it as part of the placemaking process. So you may not be able to do it within just an individual site, but if you bring in other sites and deliver it as a place, then you can create viability. I think we're all confident of that, but we need to start now.
So delivery of place, delivery of sites. Does that mean that when you break down those sites and you focus on place, you will actually be looking at perhaps sales to fund this? You will be looking at us internally funding this somehow, or are we externally funding it? Or you talked about a JV with Hyde, or you used the words JV with Hyde or JV with a third party. I mean, are we confident that we can create those kind of packages at scale?
I mean, obviously, it's hugely challenging in terms of the overall financial costs, but there are imaginative and established ways that we can look at addressing that and bringing in additional funding. So we are in a really good position in terms of having an established joint venture with another party, with our Homes of Brighton and Hove's joint venture with Hyde Housing. So we've got an established route that enables us to share risk, they have a really brilliant strategic partnership with Homes England, so can bring in really significant additional funding. We also have a track record of working with Homes England to bring in things like brownfield infrastructure levy funding. We've just brought in 13 million of that on our project at Moulsecoombe with the Moulsecoombe Hub project. So we are well experienced and have some established mechanisms to draw upon, but there's also other imaginative approaches that we can take, and other partners that we can work with, and other funders that we can talk to, and other local authorities. We've talked to other local authorities such as Bristol and Croydon who have done this as well, and learning from them. Yeah.
For those full answers, I really appreciate it.
Thank you. With apologies to the few in the room that I've still got on the list, I'm going to go online to Councillor Macleay because she put her hand up in the very first round and I didn't see her until belatedly. So Councillor Macleay.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay? Good. So thank you for the report, and to everybody who has shared details on this so far. And actually, some of my questions have been dealt with. And I think what I'm going to be sharing now is about some of the sentiments that I've been hearing from residents directly. And maybe this is something that can be noted for continued work and engagement with residents going forward. So as Anne Meadows was sharing earlier about concerns regarding leaseholders, they are very concerned about property prices in Brighton, what that means for those who don't have mortgages on their flats and would be faced with not being able to obtain another home within Brighton and Hove because the costs are higher than they could afford potentially off the sale of their flat. So I think Martin has kind of addressed some of this, but just so you're aware that this is something that they are concerned about. Council tenants are also concerned about where they will be rehomed and the costs that come with that, with moving, with carpets, with all that kind of more logistical piece. I think communicating costings with residents is essential. And where this is the decision that the Cabinet are making, I do hope that resident concerns are part of the drivers behind the decisions being made. So if, say, from a costs point of view, residents are looking at this as not being a viable option for them, I appreciate that the redevelopment piece is because we're looking at the longevity of the works here. So 20 years versus being able to go beyond that for the viability of these developments. So if residents were to say they preferred the refurb option over redevelopment, how much influence would they have on that? And is the Cabinet decision on that final? Also, residents are talking about their concern around how other council-owned sites have been sold. Recently, they're wondering if there is a risk at all for council for any of these blocks to be sold off to private developers. One of those concerns being around the availability of finance for the council to take on such large development projects at this time. And in this kind of current climate that we're in terms of financial standing, where we are looking at, say, a number of contractors going bust, there are concerns that maybe residents will be sitting on rubble sites for years to come. So wondering if there's any reassurances that could be shared today regarding those resident concerns. I was personally concerned around the relocation piece for tenants and waiting times and an already under-strained system. Harry, you addressed some of those concerns earlier, so thank you for that. The increase in the number of homes, Jill, I think earlier was saying that there wasn't a commitment to increase the number of homes. So in theory, achieving more homes beyond the 558 households across the 8 LPS redevelopment blocks. So I just wanted to double check that is something that we think is possible. And could I ask if, and kind of on what Councillor Goddard was raising, whether these will be exclusively and fully social housing properties, that we don't, through trying to make them viable developments, run the risk of a certain number of those having to become shared ownership properties. What kind of commitment can we make on that? And then finally, just the comments mentioned earlier about being rooted in communities and considering that 5 out of the 8 sites are in Whitehawk. It's good to hear that we're considering the impact of the dispersal of community and family networks and how, we really need to be leaning in on that and the impact there. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And I think quite a lot of your queries have been answered, and hopefully we'll pick out a few that haven't. So I can assure you that tenants will have help practically with moving and the cost of moving. Also, if tenants need help with other furnishings, etc., that it will be there for them because it's not through their choice, it is out of necessity. So we will be offering extra specialised help with moving tenants. It's always distressing and distraught moving, and we're going to help with that. And yes, it is possible to increase the number of, which is what my dream is and my reason for living, to increase the number of social homes in our city. And it is perfectly possible for us to do that. And I can say that that is the end goal for all of us. I don't know if you want to pick up a few.
Yeah, just to pick up, I think there is the practical point around some of the sites may attract sort of a multi-ton-year delivery in order to kind of make them viable. So I think we do need to be open about that. And that was a recommendation around exploring delivery mechanisms in order to make them sort of deliverable financially. I don't know, Sam, if you wanted to pick up the point around firms going bust.
Yeah, just in terms of the potential for contractors to go out of business, it is something which is happening more and more in construction. It is something which we unfortunately have experience of, and we as a team we've now managed projects where contractors have gone out of business partway through the project. So we now have experience of putting rescue plans into place and dealing with those issues and making sure that the project starts up as quickly again as possible and as safely again as possible. So there is some really good learning and expertise we now have within the council to help us manage that. But there are other mechanisms such as performance bonds or parent company guarantees, which can also help us in terms of making sure that we're not financially disadvantaged when that happens.
Thank you. And could I also just ask, have we let people know what kind of time frame there will be for them to move out? Do they have a kind of a ETA when they might need to be considering a move?
So we estimate the project will be between 2 and 5 years, won't it, for the move on, and it will be incremental.
So certainly at the resident days we held last week, we gave out information sheets to the secure resident tenants at St James's that we'd be aiming to start the rehousing programme there from January. We've indicated to the people in Dudney and Nettleton it would be from the end of next year, and Whitehawk would start 2 years after that. That's all subject to cabinet approval, of course, and subject to consultation in the rehousing policy. So we've started to sketch those timescales out for people. We would expect any rehousing programme for any of the blocks to last 2 to 3 years, because we'd be wanting to do it in support of residents and to make sure that we find the most appropriate place for them to be relocated.
Okay. Final thing, if I'm allowed.
Yeah,
Amanda.
go for it.
Just on the comms side of things with residents, there was one piece shared with me, which was that people knocking on doors to engage with residents. Some of the people were from London and didn't have local knowledge. Maybe that's something we could work on as well, just in terms of how people are engaging with residents and their knowledge of the area.
Okay, happy to know that we did bring in additional resource during the door knocking because we wanted to get to as many people as possible prior to the cabinet report. So, but we in recruiting more community engagement officers ourselves, we'll have the people on the ground to do that. But noted.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back into the room. Going to go to Angela, then Bridget, then Maureen.
Hello, thank you. Come as no surprise, I'm going to put in a plea for the older people. Whatever concerns everybody's got, the residents, it's multiplied for older people. I noticed that you've done an impact assessment for secure tenants. I hope that may include leaseholders as well, and what their impact will be on them. Are we able to see the impact assessment? It might be included in the pack if I've missed it, sorry.
You have to turn off.
Okay, thank you. So we have visited 99% of the properties within the 8 LPS blocks to really get an understanding about residents living within them. So that would be council tenants, secure tenants, but also households already there as temporary accommodation or leaseholders. And all of that information has helped develop a specific equalities impact assessment for us to then think about how we're going to support residents in moving on from the blocks. We'll be doing further work and consultation with residents in developing that local lettings plan and also our rehousing policy, in which we'll go even further and looking about the specific needs of individuals and about how we can best support them, and especially elderly residents, and we'll have the dedicated team that will help people. because of the limited number of people that are covered within our equalities impact assessment and individual needs identified within that, we haven't shared the equalities impact assessment because people may be identified within the blocks from the data that's been shared. So we haven't shared that within this report. But when we do our local lettings plan and the rehousing policy, we make sure that the quality impact assessment is published within that, so we can understand about the specific needs of residents within the blocks and how we're meeting that need.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Thank you. So I did notice that on some of the documents you talked about play areas and spaces, very little about spaces for older people. And even on the diagrams, there's absolutely no seating on any of the diagrams. So I would put in a plea for more evidence that you are thinking about older people when you do your planning and you present these ideas to us. That will be much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I remember I work on the Coldine project, and that was one of my bugbears is where are the benches? We need benches, we need places for people to sit outside. And we did get some benches, didn't we, as well as play areas. And I will be there to make sure there are benches, so don't worry.
And just to reassure you that the designs are just capacity studies, just to show the art of the possible. Any future designs would obviously take that into account.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say there will be further scrutiny meetings where those kind of details are really drilled into. Bridget.
Thank you for all your hard work. Just to come back to the money issue, I would like to suggest to you that you are very open and honest with residents that the money situation, not the residents who are living there, people across the city, that the money is fluid. And ultimately, if a council needs to take a loan out, then it will, and it will be at a reduced interest rate, and the interest and the payments will be covered by the rent. So I think that would be quite helpful. And then secondly, could you just give us some idea of timescales? Like, I know you've got different phases of the project. When will the first planning application go in? Like end of the year? When will it be demolished? When will there be shovels in the ground?
Yes, so in terms of design, we need to undertake considerable procurements for the multidisciplinary team, and we do have a procurement specialist who's working on that with us in the house. So that's estimated to take probably sort of 4 to 6 months just because of the size of the procurements. We would be looking at developing and kind of working with the resident engagement group alongside the kind of, if you like, the rehousing policy. So it's working in parallel rather than just sort of stopping. The idea is that for us, we'd like to be on site for St James's House within approximately 3 years. But again, that's dependent on the rehousing programme and how quickly that can go and what the impact is on wider residents. And then there's sort of a kind of followed by Hollingdean, and we're looking at sort of doing that within kind of, again, 4 to 5 years, and then a sort of slower pace for Whitehawk. We'd like to have a look at the North Whitehawk site first, so dealing with those issues within the LPS blocks and the wider master plan. So the idea is really sort of St James's House, if you're really looking at a minimum of 5 years in terms of programme, if you like, from kind of start to finish, starting that rehousing programme and then working through construction. Then Hollingdean, you're looking at really a minimum of sort of 6 years, then Whitehawk sort of around 7 years. So Whitehawk's likely to be constructed in a slightly different way, just because of the size, it's likely to be phased over a longer period of time. But I would stress at the moment, this is kind of sort of capacity studies, and where we're aiming to achieve, it might be something slow down, something speed up, but there is an aim to try and produce planning applications as soon as possible with the focus on St James's House first. Yeah, and we've had some pre-planning advice on these initial sort of concept sketches. So That's where we're looking at. But some things, like I said, will speed up and some things will slow down. It's just the nature of development.
Thank you. Maureen.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of come back to what it says in the paper, which is about incorporating wider opportunities and having a focus on that to bring residents with everybody so that it's seen not as an ongoing disaster that's having to be fixed, but something that actually can lead to better surroundings. It won't just be replicating what's there now, but incorporating more green space and tree planting and all the things that people feel enrich their lives. And of course, the consultation will be very much about that, I realise that, but it's whether it's actually delivered and whether people actually see these things happening. And I wondered if you'd got any sort of comments on that and how you would see carrying that forward.
Yes, thank you. And absolutely, yes. I mean, it is a really difficult situation that we're in, but it is a golden opportunity for us to transform council homes in our city, right across the city. And that's what I'm sort of looking forward to most. And when you see our newer buildings, Victoria Road, award-winning, I may add, so I always like to get that in. Victoria is absolutely beautiful buildings. It's got green walls, it's got back bricks, it's got all sorts of things. And our Coldine development is a really nice development where you've got nice little walkways with benches. And so people, we absolutely are going to have benches. So for us, it can, because these buildings are really old. I know that, that people are attached to them, but they're really old, let's face it, and it's our opportunity now to completely transform the way we build council homes and transform the quality of those homes. It's not just about having a roof over your head, it's a quality of life. So placemaking comes in because it's not just a home, it's a place to be, it's a place to thrive and a place to enjoy. And that's really what our vision is for the future. And we know we can do it. We've done it with Victoria Road, we've done it with Coldine, and we can do it with this. It is a long, hard journey, but it absolutely can happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Anne, did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. I did have a few other questions. And one was about the finance. If I go back to the budget in February 2023-24, the budget had £31 million to purchase the buybacks and build new. And you put aside £18 million for the maintenance of our council homes. Then the Housing Ombudsman said we had to spend more on repairs and maintenance of our own homes. So I was just wondering which funds were diverted to this, if any, and how it was paid for. And are you looking, and I'm not sure whether it's been changed yet or not, a public works loan board to get a loan to build. Now, it used to be that you could not build council homes with a loan from the public loan work board, but I don't know if that's changed or not. Then my next question was about planning, as it happens. Coldine was started under my chairmanship, as Sam will remember, 2015-16. It's taken, 8-9 years to get Coldine and Victoria Road up to speed. Tower blocks, smaller tower blocks, very high spec, which I presume you're hoping to do with these. So your timescale of 2 to 5 years, I think, will slip dramatically. There'll be an increase in costs of labour and materials over that period of time, issues with contractors, whatever it is. It takes about 8 years to build a block. So your 2 to 5 years, I would question that, and I'd like to be reassured. I would also like to talk about the standalone demolition and new build, because there was an issue about you want a separate permission for White Hawk. And talking about that, it had a piece in, I'm going back to page 79 here, where it talks about Whitehawk's existing public realm and enhancements is a long way from financial viability, which cannot be closed. That financial viability bit cannot be closed. In addition, resident feedback has concerns around overcrowding, piecemeal development, and infrastructure matters. And they all have costs attached to them too. And I'm aware of the place planning stuff that has been going on for many, many years in Whitehawk. But if we put things into the city plan, when can that be revisited? Because we've only just redone it. So for all our planning issues that you will encounter for each block, how can you be sure that you're going to develop what the city needs against what the residents expect in this sort of backdrop? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Martin. If you could take finance and maybe some funding questions, would that be okay?
Thank you, Councillor Meadows. In terms of housing revenue account, no money has been diverted. Obviously, as the report outlined, subject to agreement, refurbishment and or regeneration of the LPS blocks isn't included in the housing revenue account budget. The housing revenue account budget includes provisions for where we are to date and for buybacks. But in terms of the overall budget, with the capital programme, we've got £50 million this year for new supply. We've got £14 million specific investment for health and safety. That's in response to a lot of the issues that have come up around us being compliant with regulatory and legislative requirements. We've got £27 million in the budget for major works. That is what includes a component of work towards the LPS, not the whole refurbishment or regeneration. We've got £10 million for planned works, and we've got £6 million for sustainability work. So that's our capital programme. Overall, the HRA is £80 million a year. We also this year put in additional revenue investment. We put in an additional £1.8 million this year for tenancy services. That's to make sure we're having a neighbourhood approach to reflect some of the pressures across our service. And we put £1.1 million in for revenue investment for meeting compliance. So the HRA budget as a whole, we're not diverting one source to meet another source. Essentially, it covers all of our main provisions and meeting our main requirements. Obviously, what this funding discussion has been about is how we forward fund regeneration and renewal, which isn't from within the HRA at this point.
And just in terms on the timelines in the report, I think Laura was referring to the construction periods, but with the overall timelines for the different elements of the different projects, we have St James's House with a minimum of 5 years, Hollandine with a minimum of 6 years, and Whitehawk with a minimum of 7 years. So we are looking at those all as long-term projects, and construction does take time. These projects do take time, and they take time to be done properly, and we have expertise to do them properly. But that there is I think we've got realistic timeframes within the report. We are working, but the city plan is being refreshed, is being renewed, and we are working very closely with planning colleagues to make sure that this work aligns with the city plan, and we're very closely linked up with that work and that plan making work. And also just in terms of that wider placemaking approach, it does give us a real opportunity to look at Whitehawk as a wider place and look at all of those issues that we know are there. But there are potentially potentially extra costs there, but there's also extra opportunity as well in terms of being able to resolve some of those long-term issues.
And just to clarify, the 2 to 5 years refers to the rehousing programme. So we'll make sure we go back in the report and make sure that's very clear, the difference between the rehousing programme and the construction programme. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add for your information, Anne, that the latest little bit of scrutiny on city plan is at the next place meeting in just over 2 weeks. So we actually have that on the agenda. So I don't know if this will specifically be part of that, probably not, but we are covering city plan on this committee amongst other things. Right, well, I think we've finally reached the end of the questions, and I'm happy to say that every single question I had written down has been pretty much comprehensively answered, and by other people asking. And I just want to echo what other people have said really about what an amazing report it is. It's one of the best reports I think I've ever read. It's really thoughtful and really thorough, and it's just really impressive. You know, it's not a position any of us wanted to find ourselves in, I'm sure, but there are silver linings that could potentially be had down the line, and it's just a really excellent piece of work. So thank you, and thank everyone for their thoughtful and intelligent questions as well. So that's it. Right, so we are being asked to note the appraisal options report on the LPS blocks and to make comments or recommendations on these proposals to Cabinet. Are members happy to note this report, and do you want to make any more specific comments to Cabinet? I mean, it will be minuted and that will be sent to Cabinet, but if anyone wants to make any extra remarks, then now is the moment. Or are we happy to note the report? Well, thank you all very much, and I will draw the meeting to a close.